How would you describe yourself?
Introverted.
I just lived out my rap dream. I can go home happy now.
Humble.
I wanted to do something positive, and since my clothing line, Sneakerhead Clothing,
Okay.
I just wanted to do something like that. So yeah.
What you
It's
telling
gonna
me?
be a fantastic night. Everybody's coming out. We got a lot of excitement.
Consistent.
It's your boy Mike J. It's your boy Mike J. It's your boy Mike J. Sneakerheads Clothing. Right, man, you know what I'm saying? Mike J. Sneakerheads. We're here at the Sammy Meet and Greet.
Driven.
I'm done with Brick Hammond.
A boss. I used to work at a retail store selling high-end streetwear and urban wear, and I wanted to kind of create my own brand and make my own mark, especially because I have my love of hip-hop culture. You know, it was always a dream to see my brand in a music video or something like that. And I had a big celebrity clientele, a lot of the Minnesota Vikings players, or when promoters would bring different celebrities to town, they would come to the store that I worked at, and I would put their outfits together for their concerts. I ended up starting the brand Sneakerheads, and our initial mission was to match sneakers. At this time, 2008, a lot of the brands weren't colorful, but the shoes were getting more colorful. So the slogan was the perfect match. And at that time, the term sneakerhead wasn't as big as it is now. So I was able to get the domain name, and that should tell you right there like how early I was on that. But I started it because I wanted to be a part of the hip hop culture. I loved fashion, I loved streetwear, and I just grew it from there. I was the first streetwear brand to do a fashion show in Minnesota, and that's funny because I ended up getting copied by 3 or 4 other promoters that flat out told me they copied me. One even got fired because I brought my sponsorship proposal to a business, and the owner of the business wasn't there. One of his employees took my sponsorship proposal that I left behind for the owner and ended up running his own fashion show. But even so, with that, I was still the first streetwear brand to do a fashion show of just my brand. I ended up, after I would say starting in the second year of running Sneakerheads, I ended up getting featured in Crunk magazine, another magazine out of Atlanta called Deviate magazine, which brought me to that market. And then over the years, moving forward, I started getting featured on some of the biggest streetwear fashion blogs, whether it had to do with streetwear or sneakers. I was on Karmaloop, which was huge. I was on another site called Sneaker Freaker. I was on So Jones, which is, one of the original streetwear blog sites. There was another site called Soltron that launched. And so just being featured and being able to have a voice and being able to, talk about my journey of creating this brand from where I was from and traveling around the country and getting it to a place where it was selling online around the world and literally going from just being fly and dressing myself to creating a product that people wanted, people were willing to pay for. Yeah, so as Sneakerheads started slowing down, I had always been writing movie scripts behind the scenes, and I actually had a friend come over, and he was working on editing some video from a project I had done with Sneakerheads. I think it was a fashion show. And while he was waiting for me, he found a screenplay for one of my short films. And so he asked if he could read it. I told him he could, and he was like, "Wow, man, you write better than the students in my class," because he was in school for film. And he ended up meeting a film agent, and I was on my way to Houston for the H-Town Sneaker Summit to sell Sneakerheads, one of my annual trips I would make.
It's your boy Mike J, aka Mr. Sneakerheads. We're in Oklahoma City. We heading to the H-Town Sneaker Summit. You know what I'm saying, Houston, Texas, and we just getting it in. We're doing what it takes to get out there, get the product sold.
And he asked could he get a meeting with me. He had read my material, he liked it, so I met with him right before I went out of town, and I pitched a couple of projects to him. He liked it, he signed on, and that was kind of the birth of Empire Studio. I had already registered the business and decided I wanted to do it. I had created the logo, and I had opened up my studio space in Northeast Minneapolis, and I was doing photography at the time. So photography and kind of my own films was the big thing, and I was doing a little bit of commercial work for other people, and I had started doing workshops. I was doing photography workshops, and I would get anywhere between 5 and 15 photographers, and they would pay me to come shoot whatever theme I had set up. I would book the models for the shoot. We would shoot different places around the city, or we would shoot inside my studio if the weather wasn't right for being outdoors. And so I got the opportunity to kind of follow my other passion, which was filmmaking, and go from there. Transitioning from Sneakerheads to Empire Studios was, as a creative, it was easy, because these were things I had always been working on behind the scenes. Even with Sneakerheads, I was directing my commercials and I was casting for them and picking the photos and stuff. But publicly, it was difficult because, you know, people were like, "Oh, you're trying to do photography? I thought you were the clothing line guy." So it was a difficult. I had to prove myself, basically. It was like, and that was you know, being young and having an ego and being, you know, and having built something where you were well respected. It's difficult to even put yourself in the mind frame of wanting to prove yourself when you've gone from nothing to something and proving yourself already. But I had to, and so in 2013, I had finished a short film that I was working on called Vigilante, and this is after I had gotten a deal for a feature film that I wrote called Trapped in Minnesota. And so I wanted to prove, while I had their attention, that I could also direct and not only write. And so I put this project together, put it together professionally, got DVDs printed up, got posters done. We did a photo shoot with about $100,000 worth of professional equipment. And I took it out to Hollywood with me, and I met with a bunch of different producers and distributors and stuff like that. And when I got a chance to show them my work, they were really blown away. One of the people that I got to meet was Harry Smith, which is Will Smith's brother.
Okay. Hey, what's going on, Vigilante team? I'm Harry Smith, man. I produce movies in LA, and I really like you guys' work, man. So just keep working hard, stay positive.
And they have a company called Smith Global, where they do distribution. And so they were blown away, and I got offers to write stuff for them for different projects they wanted to develop, or just to create original content ideas that I had for them to do distribution for.
Go ahead.
All right, so this is Rob Johnson, producer. I just met with Mike, and this is a shout out to the whole team that put together the Vigilante. Great project, shot well, directed well, production was high quality, and that's the kind of stuff we need to represent out here. So shout out to you guys, good job.
So after meeting with producers and in the industry, I came back to Minnesota. I did a premiere of Vigilante for the cast and crew and stuff like that. And while I was waiting for them to move on some of the things we discussed, I entered film competitions. I was in film festivals. I did writing competitions, and I was a finalist in a bunch of them. I got to have my movie played in a real movie theater, which was a dope experience, because once again, coming from being successful with Sneakerheads and then being doubted when I started Empire Studios, and then to be able to bring that dream to life again, to see any filmmaker, that's the goal, is to see your film on the big screen. And even though that was on a small scale, it was a short film, but just to see that is to see, okay, I'm still right, I'm still on my path, I didn't go out of my lane of creativity, I'm still doing what I need to do. And I just have a passion at that point, and still currently, for being independent. Brought a Playboy model who went by the name of Steffi C. And I had brought her to the Twin Cities and did some work with her, and I had her featured in one of my workshops. And I feel like that brought more models around me that wanted to work with me because they wanted to be in the workshops. And of course, my photography skills getting better, that got my name and my brand out there a lot more. Because with the Hollywood stuff, you know, my agents and people who were around me, they were much older, and they just told me not to announce it. So I never actually announced during that time that I had got a movie deal. I had never announced at that time that I had really transitioned into film until I had something to show. There's there's short films that I produced that I never released because they weren't at the quality that I had expected. And now at this point, I feel like I should have released them for the purpose of showing growth. But I'm a perfectionist when it comes to my work, and I know, and I'm always comparing myself to the top quality. So even though I was a beginner and at the beginning stage, I knew it wasn't up to par with what I was trying to go for. So I have films that I've never even released, but once it started getting to the point where I wanted it to be, I think it was good. So I would say about a year or two transition before I was able to make money off of it right away. I think after I bought my camera, I made the money back the first week doing $50 photo shoots. And I was doing them on program mode. So if it was too dark or if it was too light, it was tight. But that's, you know, when you're beginning and you're self-taught on what you're doing, that's kind of how it is. And then I got much better down the road. Exa Clothing came from an idea that I had with sneakerheads. Actually, I had did a shirt. This is when, you know, Gucci and Louis was hot in the urban community, but those European cuts were so small. Now they've gotten better, but those European cuts were small. So I had designed a shirt that had the colors. We didn't steal patterns or anything, but that had the colorways, and the shirt said expensive accessories. So EXA stands for expensive accessories. I had an itch to get back into the fashion side, and I designed 14 designs, I think, in 2 days. And I sent it out to some of the women that I trust their opinion when it comes to fashion. Maybe it's like 6 or 7 women that live around the country, so they're seeing different styles, and they all told me which ones they liked, and I put those together and I made samples. And I did a photo shoot, and then after I did that photo shoot, I went into production, and then I put together a catalog. And this process was, I would say, 3 months total. And after that 3 months, once I finally had the product, I had it in stores within 3 weeks after getting the product, because I already knew that process. So this was me at the time. This was 2014 I started this. So at this time, this was me trying to launch another brand with a little more understanding of social media. Still not all the way understanding the tips and tricks of it, how to build the following and stuff, but just understanding that that's a tool that drives e-commerce. And I already knew the store piece. I already knew the distribution piece. So me as the owner, I was getting good prices on the materials and working with some of the best brands for my designs. But the conclusion that I came to when I started Sneakerheads, which was that women can shop anywhere, and as long as something looks good, it works. That was one of the things. That was one of the tough things. So, you know, I was price pointing at the same price point I was charging for the men's brands, and women, you know, they have many stores they can shop at where they can get a T-shirt from, you know, $3 to $12 maybe, and my stuff was, you know, probably around 15 to 24. So I had to prove myself to that market, but it was worth it, because this was something I wanted to do. And when I got my branding right, and I had a team of women that I trusted and that were intelligent and you know, understood my vision, what I was going for, they helped make sure that I was on track and understanding everything that I need to understand to pursue that market. And so I made sure my designs and my materials were top notch, and I got the price that I asked for those designs.
Exa Clothing.
Exa Clothing. Exa Clothing for the everyday woman.
Part of entrepreneurship is really planning things down to the detail and then expecting nothing to go as planned. So with Exa, we had got an opportunity to do a fashion show for Hot Import Night 10. And it was at the convention center, and you know, at the time that was definitely a strong brand, and it was a big car show. And so for this fashion show, it needed to be long too. It was supposed to be like 10 minutes, which was long for like a runway portion of a fashion show. And so I had all my models together, we had everything rehearsed, and then the day of, like, everything fell through. So I got there and I had a vendor space, and they didn't tell me tables weren't included. So I have a space with no table, no tent, nothing like that. So me and one of my close friends, Sampa, we ran down to a Walmart, I think, trying to find a table, and they were out, and we ended up going to my studio, and I had a table there, and we ended up bringing it back, and then but the doors had already opened. So on the way back to guard my materials and the stuff that I had brought out and meet up with the team, the models started flaking. I had one that needed a ride, but I couldn't give her a ride, so I asked one of the other models, who was also her friend outside of what we were doing, to give her a ride. She didn't want to give her a ride, and then she also ended up not showing up. And so now I have this 10-minute segment for a fashion show, and I had 2 models. And so I went around, because they had hot import models walking around trying to get some of them to join the fashion show. I couldn't pull it together. And so I went to the promoter and I asked, hey, is it possible we can move it back? Give me some time to bring some people together. And he was like, nope, your time slot's your time slot. And so I pretty much just had to figure it out. And so I ended up taking the 2 models that I had with me, and I decided to just use that time to get the crowd to turn up and to do a giveaway from what I had remaining from Sneakerheads clothing and from Exa clothing. And that was just like a nerve-wracking thing, because as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm introverted. I go out and do what I have to do for the passion of my art and for the passion of my businesses. But I wasn't the guy that wanted to go out on stage and be in front of 1,000 people that were there at the event. But I ended up pulling it off, and it worked out well.
I'm actually from Minnesota, but I always wanted to do that. I just lived out my rap dream. I can go home happy now.
Throughout all of my businesses, even before I had my businesses, I was around promoters, promotions, celebrities, nightlife, and pretty much with almost all of my businesses, I've done a concert or some celebrity hosted event. And one thing was missing, which was a better way for promoters to retain their fan base and for them to also reach out to that fan base. I mean, social media, mainly I would say Facebook at the time, because they had the event section. It just wasn't built. It wasn't built for promoters to use properly. It's a little bit better now, but it's still not as advanced as it needs to be. It's still limited on friend invites and things of that matter. So I had an idea, and it started off as just a kind of like a digital black card for people who came to my events, for my loyal customer base, and it grew from there. So I wanted to do a Valentine's show to kind of push Exa and have a celebrity event, and I ended up bringing the R&B artist Mario.
Shout out to the homie Mike, boy Mario, man. Hip Hop Studios doing big things. Y'all keep it locked.
And during this process of bringing Mario, this is 2014 going into 2015, and I'm like, there's an app for everything. At this point, this is when everybody was app crazy, and I'm like, there's an app for everything. There's got to be a tool for promoters. And I would search, and every list I would get would just lead back to saying utilize social media. And pretty much, if you weren't a well-known personality on social media at the time, that wasn't going to help get your word out. So I started off just wanting to create an app that kind of rewarded my customer base for coming out, and I could also reach out to them through push notification or email blast, text blast, things of that nature. And as it kept growing, I realized that other promoters were going to need this service. So instead of just it being something under my brand, it was going to be something that every promoter could and would want to use. As the time went on, during the process of booking Mario and bringing him to town, his agent contacted me, and she asked me if I knew other promoters in the Midwest so we could possibly make a weekend of kind of his promo. And outside of Minnesota, I didn't really know a whole lot of promoters, but then that made me realize that, some of these artists who have a huge fan base, who have hit records, when they're not necessarily on the pop charts or at the top of everybody's mind frame, a lot of their, agents or touring companies, they don't know how or who to get them booked through. They don't know which promoters are legitimate or janky, or which venues to contact. And that's when I knew premium needed to be much more than what I had initially thought. And so I added talent booking, I added rating systems for venues and for promoters, and it just kept growing from there. But the issue was I was dealing with something that, this was the first time I started a company where I wasn't in control of the outcome. This was something where I had to put up my own money. I had people that said they were going to put in money. That fell through, and I really had to sit with myself and go, well, this is my idea. And if I truly believe in it and I expect other people to put money in, then I need to put my money up, even if it's the whole thing. And so I did. And, as time went on in this process, I started to realize I was at the mercy of these developers because I didn't code. So this was the first business that I had started where if the people I was hiring weren't doing it right, I could just go figure out how to do it and do it on my own. This was something that was complex and that didn't exist at the time in the way that I was creating it, and it's still more advanced than most of the other options today. But I ended up going through 6 different developers to get it done, and instead of the promise of 3 months from the first developer, it took me 3 years. Fast forward 3 years later, during that process, there was a lot of self-doubt that went into it, just because, once again, having those prior successes and the other things that I had, and just the amount of money it was costing, and just knowing that the idea was solid, but wondering if I was the one to bring it to fruition, just because of the funding aspect, dealing with developers that had ego problems or just didn't want to get the work done or couldn't do the work but didn't want to admit it, and so they just kept going on, wasting my time pretending like they were working. I dealt with, just other people who were excited initially when I came up with the idea, them starting to doubt whether I could pull it off or not just because of the amount of time that it was taking. And things kind of got to a dark place just because it was something that I knew I was right. I knew that this thing was needed. I knew it would work. I knew it would generate revenue. I just didn't know if I was going to be able to bring it to life just because of what I was going through and the amount of time and worrying about if potential competitors would either be created or some of the giants in ticketing would then turn around and basically be full circle with event marketing. And after the 3-year process, I got it done, and I kicked off 2018 with 7 Super Bowl events. I had a host of promoters using my service. I did my 3rd annual Good Life Yacht Party, which is the biggest yacht party on the biggest yacht. And then I did BitCon, which was Blacks in Technology Conference. And I was lucky enough to be a part of that, which was created by the Blacks in Technology organization. And I had the opportunity to do event marketing for it and some ticketing and consulting and assisting in booking Nipsey Hussle, which was one of the hip hop celebrity artists that was there on the panel speaking about how tech was being used to push his brand. So even though it took a 3-year process to get it done and a lot of trials and tribulations, I overcame all of them and I created exactly what I set out to create. I want people to be inspired.
Right here, premium.
Premium app.
Premium, baby.
Go.
I just want to say a special shout out to Sneakerheads Clothing. One of my supporters I met tonight.
Hey, alright.
He said he has cancer.
I got terminal cancer. I ain't done yet.
He's not done yet.
I want people to see that, from sneakerheads all the way to premium, that I handle business and that I was focused and that's the way to go about things, being consistent, being humble, putting yourself out there even if you're not comfortable putting yourself out there for the sake of your business or your art or your creativity, and feeling like you're a part of something bigger than yourself. I want people to understand that even though I didn't speak on a lot of the struggles I've had in personal, in my personal life, the trials and tribulations that you can imagine just being a person of color in the state of Minnesota, making it all the way to Hollywood, making it to working with celebrities, making it to creating a product that is sold around the world. It's all possible.
So right now we're in the parking ramp. We just wrapped up a great show. Fred Hammond down in the Clerken Festival of Praise. One of the missions I have is I want to inspire young people. So I have a little story. Across the street from this parking ramp is a welfare building. And when I was 16, like a lot of people that look like me and come from what I come from, I was down here with my stepdad trying to get food stamps and cash assistance. And I was waiting in the car because I didn't want to go inside and be in that type of environment. So I ended up getting out the car and just walking around downtown, 16 years old, and I was just like, one day I'm gonna run this stuff and I need to figure out what I can do to get my foot in the door and be a boss and do what I gotta do to take care of my family and stay motivated. Now I'm 25 and I just threw one of the biggest gospel concerts to come to Minnesota. If I can do it, you can do it. Great show.
Thank God for you.
It took my whole life to become who I always said I was going to be. With that, if people misunderstand me, or if people feel that I'm not who they want me to be, they'll have to forgive me because I've worked hard for this.